So I'd like to introduce Deacon, Bruce, and the homily, the reading and the homily.
Reading today is on intention. And what I'm going to read is an excerpt I took out of a Wayne Dyer book about intention. And over 3 years ago, I started a journey on intention with a teacher by the name of Lynn McTaggart. Lynn McTaggart is a journalist, an investigative reporter, and she's been doing this for over 30 years. Anyway, one of her first books about this subject was called The Field, and it's about the quest for the understanding of the energy of the universe. And she wrote another one that was called The Intention Experiment. And in it, she did scientific experiments with leading scientific people around the world. And they established that intention could even be recorded and programmed and verified in everything, even water. And then she developed a program called The Power of E. She brought together 700 people who took this class online right at the beginning of the COVID thing. And I'm one of the people in one of these smaller groups in The Power of E. And we've been doing our intentions. We're starting our 3rd year together. This is all volunteer stuff. And we meet every Thursday night and create intentions to help people, to help situations, to just help with everything, with our intentions. Our little group helps each other with these intentions, but Lynn has these 700 people that signed up for this a few years ago. And every week she puts out a list of 3 people that are suffering from some chronic illness and dedicates 10 minutes on one day a week to all of these 700 people directing their intentions at healing that person. And the success rates are unbelievable. Some people with terminal illnesses go into full recovery. Anyway, I'm going to read from Wayne Dyer's book, and he talks about his discovery of intention. Over the past quarter of a century, I've felt a shift in my thinking from a purely psychological or personal growth emphasis toward a spiritual orientation, where healing, creating miracles, manifesting, and making a connection to divine intelligence are genuine possibilities. This hasn't been a deliberate attempt to disengage from my academic and professional background, but rather a natural evolution that's been unfolding as I began to make a more conscious contact with spirit. My writing now encompasses a belief that we can find spiritual solutions to problems by living at higher levels and calling upon faster energies. In my mind, intention is now something with greater than a determined ego or an individual will. It's something almost totally opposite. Perhaps this comes from shielding from shedding many levels of ego in my own life. But I also feel the strong influences of two sentences I read in a book by Carlos Castaneda. In my writing life, I've often come across something in a book that starts a thought germinating in me that ultimately compels me to write a new book. At any rate, I read these two sentences in Castaneda's final book, The Active Side of Infinity, while I was waiting to have a cardiac procedure to open a clogged artery leading to my heart that had caused a mild heart attack. Castaneda's words were, "Intent is a force that exists in the universe. When sorcerers, those who live of the source, beckon intent, it comes to them and sets up the path for attainment, which means that sorcerers always accomplish what they set out to do." When I read those two sentences, I was stunned by the insight and clarity that it gave me about the power of intention. Imagine that intention is not something you do, but rather a force that exists in the universe as an invisible field of energy. I had never considered intention in this way before reading Castaneda's words. I wrote those two sentences down, and I had them printed on a card and laminated. I carried the laminated card with me to the catheter lab for my minor surgical procedure, and as soon as I could, I began talking about the power of intention to everyone who would listen. I made intention a part of every speech I gave. I immersed myself in this idea to use it, not only for my own healing, but to help others use the power of intention to carry them where they're fully equipped to go. I had experienced Satori, or at least instant awakening, and was intent on offering this insight to others. It had become clear to me that accessing the power of intention relieves so much of the seemingly impossible work of striving to fulfill desires by sheer will of force. Since that defining moment, I've thought of the power of intention in virtually all my waking hours, in books, articles, conversations, telephone calls, items arriving by mailbox, and arbitrary works I might be looking at the bookstore. All seem to conspire to keep me on this path. So here it is, the power of intention. I hope this book will help you view intention as a new way to make use of it in a manner that leads you to define yourself. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents come alive, and you can discover yourself to be a greater person far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. The two words, dominant forces, kick-started me in the direction about intention. The writer was referring to forces that appear in either non-existent or dead, and he was referring to the powerful energy a person feels when inspired. If you've ever felt inspired by a purpose or calling, you know the feeling of spirit working through you. Inspired is our word for inspirited. I've thought long and hard about the idea of being able to access dominant forces to assist me at key times in my life to achieve an inner burning desire. What are these forces? Where are they? Who gets to use them? Who is denied access, and why? Questions like these have propelled me to research and write this book, and subsequently arrive at a totally new perspective of intention. Now, I can talk about intention with some authority, because when I was 15 years old, I walked into a history class, and instead of the teacher talking about history, he said, "I'm going to talk to all of you today about where you are in life and doing some life planning." And he asked us to write down short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals that we had for our life. Well, what does a 15-year-old kid know? But I kept the memory of that class. And when I was about 18, I rewrote those plans, and I decided to pursue a trade so I could make a living for the rest of my life. And I decided that after I learned the trade, I would go to college And I didn't know what I wanted to go to college for yet, but I wanted to go because I wanted an opportunity to have the suit and tie side of life and the construction worker side of life. Anyway, it served me well, and I spent a long time in the university system and ascribed to this mind over matter theory. And I wasn't familiar with the concept of intention, but I had this mind over matter attitude. And I had an accident when I was about 34 years old where I cut a couple of fingers. And on one finger, the saw blade went right through my knuckle and detached the finger. And when I went to see the doctor to put me back together, he said, well, we'll just throw this knuckle away and you'll have a stub there the rest of your life. I said, no, I'm going to get a different doctor. He said, why do you say that? Because I'm going to grow a new knuckle. He said, you can't do that. I said, well, I'm going to try. So he put me back together and he put a stainless steel pin through my finger where the knuckle joint used to be. And I made him let me watch the surgery because he gave me an arm block, so my entire arm was numb. And I asked him to talk me through it as he was putting me back together. There was only one blood vessel that he could attach to the tip of my finger so it would grow normally. But I had this mind over matter obsession that I could make anything happen. And I went back a few days later and he took an x-ray and changed the dressing. Then I went back a week after that and he took an x-ray and changed the dressing. And he said, just sit here a minute until I get that second x-ray back. So we chatted and the girl brought in the x-ray. He put the two of them up on the light screen and shook his head. He said, you're really doing it. He said, you see the difference in the gray material here that's in the way it's growing? I said, yeah. He said, you're actually growing a knuckle. I said, okay. So I went another few weeks of going back and getting x-rays and changing the dressing. But in the end, he pulled that pin out, whether it was 4 weeks or 6 weeks later, put my hand on the desk and smacked my finger because the knuckle had formed, but it wasn't mobile. And he smacked my finger to crack what was holding it from being mobile. And I got movement back in that last knuckle. He told me he was going to write me up and make myself famous, make himself famous. Anyway, I didn't know about the word intention or what its implications were at the time. I just had this mind over matter attitude. Anyway, it is my intention to write a lesson plan and teach intention eventually. Thank you.